This is Trial Transcripts Exposed by Crime in Court with Heather. Raw courtroom reads with my commentary. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Crime in Court with Heather. This is Trial Transcripts Exposed. We are reading through the Delphi trial, Indiana versus Richard Allen, and this is in the homicides of Libby German and Abby Williams. We are finally at I guess this is the star witness, I would say, for the prosecution because and she's also very controversial. We're going to go over that before we even get into the testimony. We are talking about, of course, Dr. Monica Walla. She's very problematic, and because of that, I put together a little presentation for you that we're going to go over before we even get to the testimony today because I think it's really, really important. So let us get started, shall we? All right, so this is a little presentation that I put together for you, just a little background on Monica Walla. Who is Dr. Monica Walla? I think this is quite important because we need the context. The jury isn't going to know all of this context, but we, as the observer, as the reader of this trial, need all of this context before we get into it. And as the star witness, we need to dive in to her testimony and who she is. So, first of all, who is Dr. Monica Walla? There's a picture of her that is her leaving the trial or outside of the trial when she testified in 2024 in the trial. So, Dr. Monica Walla is a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Indiana, obviously. She has a doctorate in psychology and a specialization in forensic psychology. She was the lead psychologist at Westville Correctional Facility, which is where Richard Allen was housed during most of his pre-trial and everything up into through trial. Um, a max he By the way, Westville Correctional is a maximum security prison in Indiana. So she worked there through a private company called Centurion during the years of 2022 to 2023. So Centurion is not a direct state employee. It's not, the state of Indiana Department of Corrections does not employ Monica Walla. So she was contracted through this other private company, Centurion, which she worked for. She provided mental health services to the inmates, including evaluations and therapy sessions. She treated Richard Allen during his pretrial detention at Westville, and she conducted numerous sessions where he allegedly confessed to the crimes of taking Abby and Libby's lives. Why is Dr. Monica Walla's testimony so problematic? Well, here's why. There's many reasons, actually. So, ethical violations, and I believe that she definitely crossed the ethical line. So, conflict of interest. In the state of Indiana, their psychology board's code of professional conduct says psychologists must avoid dual relationships or conflicts of interest. So, that would impair their objectivity. So, things like being in these social media groups that she was in, and gathering information about these cases or about this case that she was treating a patient for in this high profile case definitely violates this code of conduct, this professional code of conduct for psychologists in the state of Indiana and probably every state in the United States. So, treating a high profile suspect while actively following the case online is a violation, and Dr. Walla was doing this. She was ethically obligated to report any conflicts of interest to her employer and recuse herself from this case. She did not do that. She remained on the case, remained in these social media groups, so she was in many social media forums, groups. We're going to get into that, but during that time, she's taking in information about the case. She's following, gossip, lore, whatever is going on in social media, circles about the case, which is obviously not fact. And she shouldn't be doing that because it could impart thoughts in her mind and biases. So, impartiality breach. Engaging in true crime discussions would definitely expose her to biased information. So, she's going to be learning things about the case like so and so said this, so and so said Richard Allen was creepy, or whatever, something stupid like that. But it can create bias in your mind and make you think that he's guilty. So this compromises her professional judgment, obviously. How can you stay you're supposed to be neutral. How can you be neutral if you're getting information about the case and it's making you biased in some shape or form? This is seen as a violation of ethical standards again for forensic psychologists, which that is what she is. The other component of this is the digital ethics issue. So we live in a world now where social media is everywhere. Telehealth medicine is around, and that kind of blurs the lines of confidentiality for some of these professionals. Apparently, it shouldn't, but it does. And so therapists must avoid consuming any kind of case related content in order to prevent bias. If you're treating someone in a high profile case, you must avoid consuming any information or whatever about that case. Not that you have to completely avoid the news or whatnot, but you definitely don't want to be getting it from your social circles and things like that. And you definitely want to remain as neutral as possible. So any kind of exposure to media, that's why they tell the jurors not to engage in media or discussions about it because it can change the way you think about the case. Finally, there were no. We don't know. There may have been some complaints here about her ethical violations, but we won't know because those complaints are never made public. The outcome of the situation is never made public. So if she was punished or somehow, fired, whatever, what have you, for lose her license, whatever it is, she doesn't have to tell us. It doesn't have to become public knowledge um, because those complaints, ethical complaints against psychologists, are uh, private. But her actions in this case definitely highlight some ethical issues, and it's very damning for her credibility. Obviously, you can't believe half the things she says if you know that she came in there with a bias. And how much of this does the jury get to see? Probably not a lot. She is going to testify about not working there anymore, which is my next point. She does lose her job and no longer works at Westville Correctional Facility. So she is no longer employed there through her contract. So her contract has officially ended. She left or was terminated. We don't know. Remember, the outcome is not public, but she left in 2023. And shortly after that, it was shortly after her involvement with the Richard Allen trial. So the timing seems very suspicious. The ethical issues with what she was doing, and then the fact that she no longer works there shortly after. Actually, it was before the trial even started that she lost her job. So they are going to talk about that in cross examination. But will the jury get to see all of this? No, but you need to know because it's important. Important context. So, also, while not explicitly stated as due to ethics violations, the timing aligns perfectly with the defense's theory of, they first uncovered that she was in these social media groups, and that came out in public filings. And so it was undeniable, and there was proof, there were, exhibits to show that she was in these groups, And so shortly thereafter, she does lose her contract with Westville Correctional Facility. So it just seems like the timing fits. And she does testify that she no longer works there. So it is confirmed. So this implies some kind of departure amid the scrutiny. So either they fired her or told her, you might want to exit silently, quietly before this becomes a thing. Some sources actually speculate that the ethical breach led to her contract ending. Obviously, it seems very, um, logical to come to that conclusion. And then there is no official confirmation, but it's framed as a consequence of the conflict. So, for whatever conflict of interest that she had, she lost this contract with Westville Facility. And so, yeah, it just put two and two together. That's She lost her job because of this case. You can pretty much assume that. All right, so treatment of Richard Allen and the broader context, finally. Walla conducted therapy sessions with Richard Allen at Westville Correctional Facility, where he was held in isolation. As we know, he was held there for 13 months in isolation pre-trial. Why? Because he had this safekeeping order that some other judge put in place, and no other judge decided they could end it for whatever reason. He was effectually isolated from everyone except the people that were watching him, his companions. He was isolated from everyone but them. And the defense claims that this was abusive conditions. There's lots of reasons to believe that. And also, this would have contributed to Richard Allen's mental decline. Dr. Wallace's notes do document many, many alleged confessions. And I say alleged because I do not believe that he actually did confess under um, his own volition. So he had all these confessions that are in her notes, but the defense argues that her bias from the true crime forums and things that she was in all, you know, clouded her judgment here and made her an unreliable witness. It basically made her look at all of his statements with the lens of being guilty instead of from a neutral place. She also, and this I don't think gets brought up enough, she was against his will, administering Halidol or haloperidol, which is the full name, I guess, to Richard Allen. So he was getting injections. I believe he was also getting it orally. So he was getting like double dose of this stuff to be out of his mind, insane, right? So they are contributing to his mental decline by giving him this Halidol, and he was getting this Halidol around the time that he started these alleged confessions. I don't know why I should put the finger air quotes around confessions, not alleged. I don't know why I'm doing that, but anyways, you get it. These confessions, he shouldn't. Um, in most courts of law, this any confession under duress or under drugs, Halidol being this hallucinogenic drug that can create delusions, it can definitely undermine the reliability of his statements, for sure, if you are on some kind of mind, mood inducing, hallucinogenic that is also given to you against your will, by the way. And then ethical red flags. As his therapist, she had a duty of confidentiality. She should not have been on uh, these forums and things, but also just testifying about her session. So every therapist has a duty to confidentiality to their patient. In when it comes to in cases where a therapist might testify on behalf of their client, they still have to get a waiver from their client so that they can testify about things that were said in their session. So he obviously, his attorneys obviously waived his right so that she was able to um, discuss or on the stand testify about his sessions. But even that raises questions. So just the fact that she is testifying, so even testifying for someone who's a patient and you're a therapist, there's lines there that you don't want to cross. But also, she had prior knowledge to the case by being in these social groups. So we know that her mind, her thoughts, her what she knew about the case going into it, going into her treatments with Alan, has been influenced by social media. So you can't take anything that she says seriously or to allow her 100% credibility because she obviously has some credibility issues. Finally, the broader impact is that this highlights the digital ethics in psychology. There's a line that gets blurred a little bit there with telehealth and social media, especially when it comes to high profile cases and the coverage that we get about it. It should go without saying any psychologist treating a patient who is a high profile defendant should not be following their case on social media, but I guess it needed to be said to Dr. Walla because she didn't apparently know. And I don't believe she didn't know. I believe she did it on purpose, possibly to get a confession or to somehow sway the. Maybe she didn't do it purposely to, um, I don't know. Maybe she didn't do it purposely to get confessions out of him initially, but she definitely, that was her, I think, her intention later on. And I do think that because they had such little evidence on him, they needed these confessions to stick. And so, what better way to do it than to give someone drugs against their will, ones that make you hallucinate and are just fried out of your mind, and then trying to, feed facts and things that you're hearing about social media or from social media to the defendant. It's not a good situation. And this is obviously horribly ethically wrong. And she probably shouldn't have even been able to testify, or all of this should have come in able or in order for her to testify, in my opinion, in order for it to be fair. But whatever. I don't make the rules. Therapists must avoid any kind of social media, forums, anything like that in cases to prevent any kind of bias or just even facts that you think you're hearing. Like sometime, okay, for instance, let's say the Karen Reed case, if you went off of what the news said in the very beginning, they said that they had video of Karen Reed actually mowing John O'Keefe down. But we find out later that's obviously not true. After two trials, now it hasn't, this video, supposed video, never came out. So you can't just rely on what you're hearing in social media circles and on the news and things like that. And so for her to go in with those facts in her head about the case, whatever those facts were, is definitely affecting her bias. And especially in cases like this where they're high profile cases because there's even more out there about the case, right? So you really have to be vigilant in not engaging in social media activity. I'm sorry that was a little bit long, but I wanted to give you guys the full context and before we get started on direct examination for Dr. Monica Walla, which is beginning now. Ms. Stacy Diener for the prosecution is going to be doing the direct examination. We're going to try to get through all of direct, but it may not happen, so just be aware. She's on the stand for a little bit, so we're going to try to do this in two parts where this is direct and then next episode is cross, but I can't promise anything. Sometimes I need to take a break. All right, so let us get started here. Stacy Diener asks, Ms. Walla, could you please state your full name and spell your first and last name? Monica Walla, and she spells it. And I'm going to let you know that that microphone does not help us in this area, so the jury and the attorneys will not be assisted by that microphone. The court says you don't need to pull that forward. Yeah, there you go, Ms. Diener says. So I'll just ask you to speak a little more loudly than you're used to. Could you tell us what your profession is? I'm a clinical psychologist. And what is your level of education? A doctorate in clinical psychology. Could you just briefly describe the education that you got to that point? hmm I went through college, received my associate's bachelor's, master's degree in counseling, and then pursued a doctorate in clinical psychology. And then is there an examination that you take after that? There is. To complete that process, there's a licensure examination. Once you've completed all your coursework and clinical work, you take a licensure exam. And you did all of those things, is that correct? I did. And does that earn you the title Dr. Monica Walla? Yes, in your profession. And are you licensed as a clinical psychologist in Indiana? I am. And did you prepare or provide to us a curriculum vitae, which is just a fancy word for a resume, a long resume, that outlines your education, your experience, and your work history? I think you have it. I do. May I approach the witness, Judge? Says Miss Diener. The court says you may. Dr. Wella, I'll show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 302. It has several pages. Please take a look at those. Do you recognize the document? I do. And is that your curriculum vitae? Yes. Does it also have your Indiana license attached? Yes. The state would like to move Exhibit 302 and publish to the jury. It's offered. No objection by Rosie. The court says, all right, without objection, 302 is admitted and you may publish. It's published. Dr. Wallace says, during the years of 2022 and 2023, were you employed at the Indiana Department of Corrections? I was. And what was your position there? Lead psychologist. And could you explain for the jury whether or who your employer was and how you provided services to DOC? We were employed by Centurion at that time, so we're a contractor. We don't work for the DOC, for the state. And so your position was lead psychologist at DOC, though? Is that correct? Correct. And so in that position, did you serve at one facility or multiple facilities? Primarily at one facility. I mean, there are times when we go and help other facilities, but primarily at Westville. Okay. And was that all the Westville facility? Was that all at the Westville facility? Yes. And so would you include what's referred to as the WCU? Yes. And is the WCU only a small part of that facility? It is. Remember, that is where Richard Allen is housed in isolation. Okay. When you would provide services there, did you have a caseload of a number of clients or not necessarily? It would just be if there were any more serious cases that needed more attention, I would take them on. And so, in that capacity, did you take on I'm not sure how you refer to them. You refer to them as patients or clients, or I see a designation of II. Incarcerated individual at the time. Okay. And so that's how you would refer to a person you were providing services to? Yes. So an II, an incarcerated individual. So during your time at the WCU during 2022 and 2023, did you have occasion to provide services to Richard Allen? I did. Were your services in conjunction with other mental health professionals? Yes. And so who would those other mental health professionals be? So initially, it was just me as well as psychiatry. Okay. And later on, we did have master's level and bachelor's level mental health professionals also see him. Okay, so initially it was just you? Yes. And how did that happen that you became his provider when he came into the DOC? It was just assumed, given the high profile nature of the case, that I would just take it on. It was just assumed. Okay, did it require more time or more intensive services because of the nature of his situation? Yes. And so, how was that different from your other duties with other inmates? I guess there was no one else that I would be seeing every day for an extended period of time like that. Okay, but you did that with Mr. Allen? Yes. Now, when you would see him, did you prepare documents regarding your sessions with him? Yes. And how would you record that information? Into the electronic medical record system. For those who don't know what that is or how that might work, could you give us a bit of an explanation? So it's not paper records where we write notes by hand and file them into a paper chart. It's getting into a system on the computer and typing your notes in the program. And did you use that program for all the inmates that you counseled with? Yes. When you would meet with someone, did you have a computer with you? No. In order to take down those notes in the system? No, not in that situation. Okay. So tell us how that would work with Mr. Allen. I would just take notes on a notepad and then put my notes into the system when I got to my desk. So you're having to double do your notes. I think there might be some room for a lot of error there if you're typing them in later and afterwards. And yeah, okay. But I see it's kind of problematic. And remember, she also deleted all of her notes or got rid of all of her handwritten notes. Okay. Were there other people you could see where you would have the computer system with you at a session? Yes. Where would you meet with Mr. Allen for your sessions? We called it the APOD cubicle, so it's on APOD where he lived. It's a room that has a partition and Mr. Allen would sit on one side and I'd sit on the other side. Could you and he see each other? Yes. And was it a secure cubicle? Yes. Was Mr. Allen shackled in the cubicle? Not in the cubicle. Well, he would get unshackled as after he was in the cubicle. Okay. And so you would take handwritten notes during the session? Yes. And then how much time would pass before you would then create the electronic document? I mean, ideally the same day. And so would you say that happened in almost every situation? Most of the time. Now, there are situations where you would do an addendum report. Mm-hmm. Would that be an exception? It would depend on the reason for the addendum. So maybe I saw him again the same day. I could add an addendum, or, for example, with the diagnostic criteria, I put that in a separate file just so it's separate from the note, just more clear. But yeah, I mean, most of it would still be in the main note. Judge Diener, or I'm sorry, not Judge Diener, Stacy Diener, the prosecution attorney, uh, says, okay, Judge, may I approach the witness? There's a Judge Diener too who is in this case. That's why I said Judge Diener. Plus, she said Judge. So, whoops. It was a slip of the tongue. But, whoops. She is not. She's the prosecution, one of the attorneys on this case. The court says you may approach Dr. Walla. Dr. Walla, I'm going to show you what's been put in a binder just so that it's not falling all over the place while you're up here looking through it. So this is States Exhibit 303 and States Exhibit 304. If you would just take a quick look at those and tell me if you recognize those. Are those the documents you would prepare with regard to your sessions with Mr. Allen? Yes. Judge, I've already provided copies to defense counsel in these two groupings. And then she asks, to the witness, she says, and would these assist you in testifying since it would be difficult to remember? I think so, yeah. So much information? Yes. State would move to admit Exhibit 303 and 304, but only publish 303 to the jury so that they can follow along with those. It is offered, no objection by Rosie. The court says, all right, without objection, it is admitted and you may publish. The court says, so just so I'm clear, Ms. Diener, you want the jury to follow along as you publish 303? Yes, says Ms. Diener. Court says, all right, okay, you may proceed. Dr. Walla, I'm going to start with the select group that you find in the first tab. That is Exhibit 303, and we'll go through those. And then we'll go to the General tab in the back, just for your understanding. Okay. So when you started seeing Mr. Allen, when did that begin? November 2022. Okay. And as you notice, this particular exhibit starts well after that. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, and so the first document is from April 5th of 2023. Are you familiar with that document? Yes. Okay, and we'll talk about this one in a little more length just to give you just to give the jury some familiarity with the categories within the report, and then later we'll be able to make reference to those categories more quickly just to provide more understanding, okay? So with regard to the report from April 5th, what is it about the document that identifies who you are meeting with and documenting information regarding? Are you just referring to the name? Yes. Okay, well, on the front page, you'll see the patient name, date of birth, DOC number, date of visit, and the visit type. And the visit type, when it indicates daily, does that mean that he is at the watch level where you're watching him every workday? So the visit type is showing self-unaliving monitoring, but that does indicate it would be a daily visit. Down below, after the date and the time, and we get to the self-unaliving, oh, observation, and it says daily. Yeah, okay. Does that indicate that you're seeing him daily as opposed to something that would be a longer time frame? Yes, anyone on self-unaliving watch gets seen daily. Okay. Then we have a subjective portion that says reason for placement. Is that correct? Yes. And could you briefly describe what the purpose of that particular section is? It outlines the reason why the individuals placed on this watch, so anything that occurred around the time of the placement, as well as the level of the self-unaliving watch. So in this first one, at the very end, it says he will be placed on self-unaliving watch, close observation. Okay, and what does close observation mean in your business? Close observation means that the individual does not necessarily have to have a companion at the door at all times. They just have to be watched every 15 staggering intervals of 15 minutes. So you didn't have to have someone sitting at the door the whole time. You just needed a guard that passed the hallway every 15 minutes that looked in there every now and then. But yet they sat someone in front of the door for 13 months straight. And what did that cost them in taxpayer dollars? Anyways, okay, and we've heard some testimony about companions. So are you referring to the self-unaliving companions? Can you repeat that? Are you referring to the self-unaliving companions? Correct. And you refer to the 15-minute intervals. Are you talking about officers that would check on an inmate on this self-unaliving watch and make a log? Yes. And did you refer to those logs for information to provide yourself necessary information you couldn't gather during the time that you were with Mr. Allen? Yes, that's why in the reason for placement, I use a lot of their quotes. So she's using all those guards that were sitting there watching him and writing down whatever he was saying, the mumbles he was saying. She's using that for her diagnosis or her treatment or whatever. Yeah, she's using all of their notes. Seems such a invasion of one's privacy. And did you refer to those logs? She says, yes, that's why the reason for the placement. And she uses the quotes. Okay, and those appear in the subjective reason for placement. Is that correct? Yes. In that area, are you referencing entries on the self-unaliving log? Yes. And do any of those indicate your observations as well? Not in that area of the notes. Okay, now the fourth, his status was changed. Is that correct? I say status, but I'm saying the level of his watch. Yes, he was not on self-unaliving watch and he was placed on self-unaliving watch. So originally he wasn't and now he was. So prior to April 4th, were you seeing him daily? No. So she started seeing him in November, but she was not seeing him daily until April. This happens to be around the same time that I believe the Holodomor uh, injections start happening. What would have been the frequency of your visits? So when he came to us, he from the RDC, he was on self-unaliving watch from there and remained on self-unaliving watch at Westville for a month. So in December of 2022, he was released from self-unaliving watch and he was off self-unaliving watch up until April 4th. So between just the end of December to April, he was being seen maybe once a week. Okay. Now, there's already been testimony. So, what happened then in April? He went back on self-unaliving watch. Is that what we're to believe? Because she starts seeing him daily. I'm confused. Why December? So in the beginning, in December when he first came from, well, November to probably December when he first came. He came in at the end of November. So that's when he first came in. So they put him immediately. Anytime somebody comes in new to a facility, they put them on a self-unaliving watch. And then it usually goes away in a month or so. And then it seems like it did. So between December and April, he wasn't on this self-unaliving watch. And then all of a sudden, April 4th, now she's seeing him every day again. I don't know. I don't know why. Probably because they realized the case was weak and they needed more evidence against him. Okay. Now, there's already been testimony that he's in solitary confinement cell. Is that correct? Yes. And that cell has a camera? Yes. And he is videotaped when he's moved to and from his cell. Is that correct? Yes. And you were aware of all of that? Mm-hmm, yes. And so when you change supervision or observation from close to constant, what impact does that really have on the circumstances? Sometimes very little. My orders don't cover being recorded when he leaves the cell. That wasn't my decision. The only difference if we go from constant to close or vice versa, it's having either somebody sit at the door the entire time looking or somebody who can kind of come and go, but as long as they're seeing them at a staggered interval of 15 minutes, that's close observation. Okay. And so, if you're comparing close to constant, what would be the reason for someone to be on constant versus close? Well, constant is reserved for more severe instances of imminent harm. In this situation, I placed him on close. He was not exhibiting anything in regards to wanting to take his own life, but things have obviously taken a turn in terms of the things that he's talking about, which was significant. Okay. So was this when they started putting him on drugs that caused hallucinations? Maybe that's why his talking changed so significantly? I don't know. But not at the point where we felt that he was in imminent danger of harming himself. And so, are you referencing the statements in the first paragraph that you took from his self-unaliving note, a companion notes, that he was confessing to his charges? Yes. So she's taking those things that he said by those companions as confessions, which is hearsay. But okay. And so that was your consideration in putting him on a closer watch? Yes. Does the watch level status also impact what kind of personal property he's allowed to have, and is that related to his safety? Yes. Can you explain, please? Sure. So, in a situation, let's see here, we just started him off with the standard. So, he would have monitored showering and toileting. He would have a mattress and a safety blanket. He would have the kimono, the safety kimono. I remember he does not have clothes. He's wearing this thing which is like a dress, a kimono, a schmuck, a smock, whatever we want to call it. I allowed the regular meals and books, documents, tablets, commissary. Usually those aren't provided, but we were just I wanted him to have his stuff. So at that point in time, I allowed those items as this was just the first day. So, okay. So you indicated that you didn't have any control about the nature of his cell and how he was moved? No, with regard to security. But you did have the ability to make decisions about how much personal property he'd be able to have if it was safe? Yes. And when you say regular meals, what could you do about a meal that would make it more safe? They don't give them utensils, so I forget what they would call it now. They don't get the styrofoam. I don't, styrofoam tray, maybe. So there was something different? Yeah, the making of the packaging more safe. Okay. And is that, again, a precaution for self harm? Yes. Okay. So in this particular document, then there's a section called patient complaint. Is that correct? Yes. And does that report contain a reason for placement in patient complaint section? Yes. In the patient complaint area, would you be making notes and then entering them into the electronic system based on details from your conversation with Mr. Allen? Yes. How would you begin a session with Mr. Allen? I would typically ask him how he was doing. And you were aware that he was being housed as a pretrial detainee, is that right? Yes. And did that give him a particular status? Safekeeper. So, again, with that safekeeper, why did we need that for so long? Is a good question I have for the judge in this case. And I don't know why the attorneys, I know they had tried multiple times to get him moved, but and then they got kicked off the case and then they had to get back on and try to get him moved again and it was a bit much. But they did try to get him out of there. And do you recall when you did that? Hold on, let me back up. Okay, at some point you had talked with him about not discussing his case. Yes. Do you recall when you did that? I don't recall the date. Was it early on? I think it was early on. Okay, like back in November of 2022? Sounds right. Okay, we'll get to that. It's in here, but I just wanted to make reference to it in case you knew. And so, other than asking him how he was doing, did you ever ask him questions about his pending case? No. Did you discourage him from discussing it with others? Yes. Martyr, the saint. Saint Dr. Monokawala. Did you believe that Mr. Allen understood the dangers of talking about his case? Did he know that it was a bad idea? I mean, that answer may be different depending on at what point in time. Okay. Did you find Mr. Allen to be an intelligent person? Yes. He had some college education. You were aware of that, correct? I think so. You did assessments to learn about his background, is that right? Yes. He had a job that involved management skills, is that correct? Yes. And over the course of time that you met with him, was he at times a good communicator? Yeah, yes. And so on this particular date, did Mr. Allen decide to talk to you about his case? Yeah. And was that what prompted, or was that prompted by you? No. So Mr. Allen's just like, I want to talk about my case all of a sudden. Could you please read the first paragraph that you entered in the patient complaint on 4/5 of 2023? Okay. Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I'm going to object to the form of the question. She's just asking her to read the narrative from a paragraph. I think she can question her about it, but Ms. Diener says, it's her entry, Judge. We had comparisons reading their entries yesterday all afternoon, or sorry, companions reading their entries yesterday all afternoon. That didn't seem to be an issue. The court says, so you want her to ask her questions about the entries? Is that what you're saying? Mr. Rosie says, well, if we're gonna introduce the evidence by way of her just reading the entries, then I guess when it gets to me, I'm asking the court to give me the same, deference. The court says, of course. And we could be here for weeks, says Mr. Rosie. The court says, okay. Mr. Rosie says, I don't think it's a proper form of the question. I think she should ask her, what did he say? What did he say on April 5th? The court says, sustained. Ms. Diener says, you said sustained, Judge? Court says, yes. Ms. Walla, it's a doctor, but whatever. Ms. Walla, did he make a statement to you with regard to, actually, I'll just ask you, did you include in your report a quote that he stated, I killed Abby Williams and Libby German? I'm sorry. Yes. And that appears in quotation marks, is that correct? Yes. And so, how is that particular statement documented when you're in your session with him so that you know that you're being accurate? I just write it down. And does Mr. Allen verbatim? Yeah, I'm sorry? Verbatim. I'd write it down on my sheet. And does Mr. Allen see that you have paper and a pen in your session? Yeah. And so he should be aware just from a visual perspective that you're writing things down? Yes. Now, you indicate that he became tearful. Is that right? Yes. And he continued to give you more information, such as he committed the murders on his own? Yes. Did he give you that information? Yes, he did. He made sure they were dead because he didn't want them to suffer? Objection leading, says Mr. Rosie. The court says sustained. In the first paragraph of your report, does he talk about whether he committed the offense? Yes. Does he indicate whether anyone helped him? He did not indicate anyone helping him. Does he say that he did it alone? Yes. Yes, it does say that. Okay. Does he talk about whether he knows whether the victims were deceased before he left the scene? Yes. What did he say about his intentions? He said he knew his intentions were sexual in nature. Does he speak about the age of the victims? He reported thinking that they were at least 18 or 19, but could have been as young as 11. Does he give any other indication as to why he may have killed them? He talked about being selfish all of his life, also being a coward, and so when he got scared, he took their lives in order to preserve his own. And does he say anything about how he feels in it about it in retrospect? He was talking about hoping he could apologize to the families of the victims and wished he could go back and change his actions. Okay. Does he expand at all about the sexual intent of the murders? He alluded to having a sex addiction. And did he give some background on that as well? A little bit. He said he didn't think he was molested as a child, but admitted to molesting his sister as a child. That is incorrect. He never did that. He reported viewing Playboy magazines and other sexually explicit materials, as well as experimenting with both male and female children his age, and he said he felt that's where the problem began. Okay. Does he also talk to you in this session about his drinking history? Yes. I direct you to the fourth paragraph under patient complaint. So he admitted being an alcoholic, that was his word, twice since 2011, and he talked about how when he's in that state, he was he was cared for by his wife. Okay. Now, does he also have reference to religion? And I direct you to paragraph 6. He reported taking God into his heart on March 21st, 2023. He asked if I believed in God. He said he hoped everyone would find God before they died. He had recently received a Bible and reported wanting to read it before he died. He reported Psalms 23 gave him a sense of peace. At this point, when he received the Bible and said that he took God into his heart, he is incarcerated. And do you talk about what he was like with the Bible, with his Bible? He stated that he hoped he would be able to give it away, possibly even to families of Abby Williams or Libby German who could give, so they could give it to someone they think might need help. And oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead. No, that's it. Next question is, and did he express any remorse for his actions? I believe he did. I just directing you to paragraph 1. I don't know where to look for that. Paragraph 1. Paragraph 1, yeah. So, where he says he wished he could go back and change his actions and apologize to the families. Okay. Did he also talk about how he was doing at this point in the DOC and with regard to his mental health? I would direct you to paragraph 7. This is all like, there's no context. All this stuff is just kind of statements, phrases, things taken out of context. But they did that for the correctional officers as well. She says, yes. So he said he was glad that he had not killed himself. He stated he hoped to be able to see his family and hopes they will forgive him. He expressed appreciation for being fed, clothed, and having a small view of the outside from the top of his window. He reported being happier than he's ever been in such a terrible place. Maybe it's because they started drugging him. I don't know. Okay, so prior to this particular time, and maybe at the assessment stage very early on, is religion a question that is asked in order to determine whether a person finds that to be a comfort? Yes. And so, in your initial contact with Mr. Allen, was that something that was important to him? Not at that time. Okay, so was this information new to you at this point? It was new. And did you observe it in ways that were not just Mr. Allen telling you? Yes, he would ask to speak to the chaplain. He would ask for Bibles. He slept with the Bible too. Did he offer you his Bible? It's possible. I don't recall. Did he express concern over your faith, over your own faith? He did. Okay. He did. So it appeared to be very important to him. Is that correct? Yes. So it appeared to be very important to him. Is that correct? Yes. Now, in this particular report, since we're using it as an example, after the patient complaint, there's a section that's underlined that says objective. What is the purpose of that section? So this is where, well, under objective, we would be marking various risk factors. So at this point, we just had the legal status changes, and that is his initial incarceration. And then under that is the clinical observations. Okay. And what kinds of things do you put in your clinical observation section in general? Basically, my impressions from that encounter. And so, in this particular report, did you make a statement about or document a reflection about how Mr. Allen was behaving when he made this confession to you? So here he kind of went between crying and between solemn and even having a bright affect. At times, he was calm, and at times he exhibited a bizarre smile. When confessing, he did it in an almost matter-of-fact manner. He claimed memory lapses and said that he may not remember what tomorrow's date will be. He was tangential throughout. He was sharing information with very little prompting, and then he demonstrated the abrupt religiosity which wasn't present before. And that's how you refer to the fact that he's indicated to you that he had found God on March 21st? Yes. Okay. You indicate in the last line of it additional clinical observation, his sudden shift in presentation is purposeful and instrumental. What does that mean to the layperson? So there may be secondary gain associated with it. In other words, potentially feigning or faking. What kinds of behaviors in this particular instance are you referring to as potential feigning? It looks like he reported that he may have drank water out of the toilet but it's because he didn't have running water. When asked if he had running water, he said it didn't matter. He said he may have been delirious at times from not eating. And I just mentioned that it's unclear whether his claims are genuine and he is monitored via camera and in person at all times, and odd behavior was not reported until the Monday after his attorney visit. So they're trying to blame his odd behavior on his attorneys? Got it. Okay, cool. So when you use the phrase purposeful and instrumental, is that in any way also described as being manipulative? It can be. Then your report goes on to comment, and it looks like in that particular area, you just reiterate what his level of supervision or observation is. Is that correct? Yes. And then there's current mental health status. What is the purpose of that section? To document any deviations from a normal mental status. Okay, so are those actually in the categories underneath that of the general observation and mental status? Yes. Okay. When he was communicating this confession to you, was this the first time that he had made this kind of statement to you? I don't remember. How do you not remember him confessing to you before? Okay, and if you did, you would have documented it, correct? I would have, yes. And when you met with him this particular day, were you already aware that he was making confession statements to door companions, to his self-unaliving companions? Yes. Were you already aware that he had written a statement to the warden, Gallipo? I believe so. When you talk about appearance within normal limits, would that indicate that you didn't see anything alarming or concerning about his appearance? Correct. Build and stature is more of a physical description, is that correct? Yes. Posture, again, physical? Yes. Eye contact, it says intense, intermittent. What was normal for Mr. Allen with regard to eye contact or gaze? Sometimes intense was normal, but I feel like across time there were various presentations. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I would see intense staring or gazing, but it was intermittent. So then he'd kind of stop doing that and maybe look away. Okay. What is the purpose of activity and then indicated with normal limits? What's that referencing? Just general. I believe that's just general. Let's see, being able to walk around and take care of himself in that way. So physical ability? Mm-hmm. And then attitude towards examiner. You document here cooperative. So if he was cooperative, you would also document that. Yes. Or uncooperative. Sorry. If he was cooperative or uncooperative, you would document that. But he was cooperative. Yes. And then in mental status, there are categories as well. Are any of these of particular concern with regard to the subject matter he discussed with you that day? I mean, what I had mentioned was that he was late liable, so his emotions were kind of up and down. His thought process was both circumstantial and tangential, so he would go off on a tangent and sometimes never return, or he would go off on a tangent and sometimes come back around. So, with regard to the paragraph that you documented about the particulars of him committing the homicides, did he relate that information in a chronological manner? Yes. And was that portion tangential or was it concise? No, it was concise. That area of mental status continues on the next page and it has a place for you to indicate whether he was having any hallucinations or delusions. Is that correct? Correct. And there are none reported here. That's correct. And then there's interventions. What does that tell us? Just the fact that I was there. I was actively listening to him, and we proceeded or processed the events that he brought to the session. Okay. And then under assessment, what were you including in that section? It appeared at the time his anxiety and depression had improved. He was not trying to take his own life. I did have some questions about some of the things some of the stuff appeared questionable, like drinking from the toilet. Yeah, that could be it, but otherwise he was cooperative and communicative. Okay. What are your expectations for Mr. Allen in this setting with regard to his status as a safekeeper? What is it that expect him to engage in and how do you help him? Well, I mean, ideally, meaningfully work on any mental health concerns. Okay. And remain safe. I mean, safety was a big one that was focused on. And you say mental health concerns. Are you referring to his depression and anxiety? Yes. And are those concerns that he came to DOC with, to your knowledge? Yes. What are you documenting under the section of plan? A plan was just a plan just kind of repeats the items that he can have. Okay. While he's on this self-unaliving watch. Okay, and the lower section under the gray bar that may or may not be able to be that you may or may not be able to read. I think that just generates simply based on what I just put up above, so it's kind of repetitive. Okay, thank you. So the next document in the exhibit would be a report for May 2nd, is that correct? Yes, Okay. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page. So the report starts the same, does it not? Yes. Okay. And this again is a daily visit for Mr. Allen. Yes. And again, the reason for placement carries forward, is that right? Yes. And under patient complaint, where did you see if you documented Mr. Allen on that date? Can you repeat the question? Yes. Where did you meet with him? In the same place, in the APOD counselor's cubicle. And how was Mr. Allen's ability to communicate that day? He was very tangential and focused on a lot of the same stuff. There were a few concepts he kept repeating throughout the session. So he keeps going in tangents, is what she's saying by tangential. He keeps going on in different areas. Okay. On that particular day, did he make statements about the death of Abby Williams and Libby German? And could you describe what you documented? Okay, he did make statements. I see that there are categories in the particular report. Is that correct? Topic areas? Yes. Okay. If I could direct you to the topic, the category of death, taking your own life, and murder, I know, I am looking at it. Okay. Specifically, as it pertains to Abby Williams and Libby German, he said, I killed Abby Williams and Libby German. I will kill everyone. I will wipe out the whole world after I die. He mentioned starting World War III. Does that sound like someone that's in their right mind? But she says he's fine. I believe all of his confessions, even though he's saying that he's going to start World War III. Did he make any statements about wanting to die? Just before that, he said, is it okay to kill myself? He said that the other incarcerated individuals tell him to kill himself, so he's asking if it's okay to kill himself. He stated that he did not want to die. I did ask if he had any thoughts or methods that he may use if he were to consider it. What? You're trying to give him ideas, lady? He said he could climb up into the sink, and he said, I killed myself by killing my entire family and best friends. I'm not going to kill myself. I'm too much of a coward. These sound like ramblings of someone who doesn't know what they're saying. Now, at this point, he's making reference to killing other people besides Abby Williams and Libby German. Is that correct? Yes. Did you perceive those other statements to be confessions as well? I kind of took that as more of a metaphor for the situation. And you actually included that in your report? Yes. Okay, and I would direct your attention to the mental illness section. There was some testimony, though, through the companion sheets about whether he was doing certain things with his own feces. Were you familiar with that? Yes. And so, in that particular section, did you document information with regard to discussion about why he might do that? I did. Please share that. When asked why he consumed feces, he stated, "Because I'm insane." When pressed for a logical explanation, he stated, "Because I was afraid I wouldn't have water." He was told this didn't make any sense. He said, "I know." Again, does that make any sense to a normal person's brain who's thinking normally and not under duress and being possibly told to confess constantly and what to confess to, and people in the cell or in the prison telling him to take his own life? And yeah, he already had depression and mental health issues before he went in, and the way that they treated him and everything that they did to him in pretrial incarceration led to the downfall of his mental health even more. So, to the point where he was eating his own feces and rubbing it on himself and rubbing it on the walls in his cells and drinking his toilet water. I don't think someone fakes that. When asked why he consumed, he says, "Because I'm insane," and all of that. Okay. Based on your review of this report thus far, was Mr. Allen engaging in conversation with you? He was. And was he able to answer questions? Yes. Was he able to initiate topics of his own? Yes. In the very last paragraph, I believe you document your observations of his state at the particular time. Do you see that last paragraph? The additional clinical observation above that. Oh, okay. So he had difficulty staying on topic for clarifying information. His behavior improved. He did not present as psychotic. He stated he isn't clear on what the expectations are for his behavior aside from taking his medication, like super duper hallucinogenic drugs. We talked about taking care of himself by showering and eating. He should not be covering his window with his mattress and engaging in any other defiant behaviors. In terms of self harm, he has both said that he will and won't kill himself and stated he did and didn't want to die. At this time, no changes will be made due to his inconsistent presentation and unpredictable nature. I allowed more property, so I included books, puzzles, documents, and any other property except sheets and clothing to see if he uses it properly, and he used to, as he used to, sorry. Obtaining a tablet for regular communication with his wife or a phone call with her ASAP will try to be coordinated. The warden mentioned providing a TV. The HSA will be informed about his possible request for a drug test. He randomly asked about drug tests. Okay. So there's several topics there I'd like to ask you about. So we'll just start with the beginning of the paragraph. So his behavior had improved, or what it might have been prior to May 2nd of 2023? Yes. And you indicate he does not present as psychotic. What's the significance of that? That our diagnosis that we assigned, it seems to have been he's in remission, basically. Huh? Okay. Describe for the jury what diagnosis you're referring to and what the psychotic reference means. Mm-hmm. Grave psychotic disorder or situational psychosis is another term. It lasts for about a month and then remits, and the person can usually return back to normal functioning. Or in other words, you can dose someone with a bunch of Halidol and get confessions out of them, and then they start acting nuts, and then you take them off of it, and they start going back to normal. Okay. And so you're indicating that on this particular day, he does not present as psychotic? Correct. You indicate he talked about expectations and not understanding what they were, and you clarified. Mm-hmm. What did you say his expectations or the expectations were of him? So, those expectations you discussed with him, is that pretty much all you expect of him? Eat at the time, yeah. So, eat your meals, yeah. Take care of yourself, right? Yeah. Accept showers, go to rec, right. Those are all the available things to him, correct? Yeah, stay active. Don't just lay in bed. But you're in a cell 24/7. And then when they do drag you out, they're dragging you, they're recording you, everyone's telling you to take your own life. So when you do leave your cell, it's not a pleasant experience. Okay, you would provide him with reading materials, and it sounds like puzzles and things to do? Yes. And were there ever periods of time where he was receptive to those things and used them? I think in the very beginning, and then it kind of slowly dwindled. Did those things appear to assist him? In the beginning. Okay, I thought. Okay. Participating in conversation with you, would that be something that would improve his circumstances? I don't know. And with other mental health professional and with other mental health professional or medical professionals, I'd like to think so. That's all speculative. It was an opportunity for him to leave his cell, wasn't it? Yes. Okay. When he makes, you said he both said he will and won't kill himself. What kind of situation does that present for you when you're assessing his level of observation with regard to taking his own life? Well, at this point, he's already on constant, so we just kept him on constant watch. Okay. You make a reference to obtaining a tablet for regular communication. Did Mr. Allen have a tablet when he came to DOC? He was provided a tablet, yes. Was he provided a tablet in a faster fashion than might be normal? My understanding is that was the case. Well, how do you know? You didn't arrange it. You shouldn't even be testifying to that. Okay. I am the provider of the tablets. Okay. Though this is that's my understanding. She said, I'm not the provider of the tablets, though that's my understanding. But you know about this, though, the course of your interaction with inmates. Yes. And so, do you know why, on this particular occasion, he did not have a tablet? I think at this time the tablet was broken. And did Mr. Allen break it? It appears that was the case. And then it says the warden mentioned providing a TV. What's the process for an inmate to obtain a TV, if you know? I mean, honestly, with the TV, we probably could have gotten him a TV, but he didn't want one. Okay, so that's another amenity, so to speak, that was available to him that he declined. Yes. On this particular date, was he cooperative in the sense that he participated in the session? Yeah, for the most part. Let's move on to the next document, which would be the addendum to that same date, but prepared on May 3rd. Yes. Okay, you made reference to a diagnosis, is that correct? That's correct. Does this document reflect what you were referring to? Yes. And so you could please explain to us the diagnostic criteria again and what it is that applied to Mr. Allen. Okay. So this is for brief psychotic disorder with marked stressors. You have to, criterion A is the presence of one or more of the following symptoms, and the options are delusions, hallucinations, disorganized speech, or grossly disorganized or catatonic behavior. So we are seeing the disorganized speech and the disorganized behavior. And so it appears those are in bold print because those are the ones that apply. And so it was no indication that he had delusions or hallucinations? No. And only one of those would have been sufficient to at least get through the first step of a diagnostic criteria. Right. Okay. So he had the third one, disorganized speech. I see that there's a number 4, but up on the end of line A, it says at least one of these must be present, 1, 2, or 3. So what is the purpose of number 4? So if whether or not there's one there, it kind of doesn't make or break him meeting the criteria. It just doesn't matter. Okay, number 4 doesn't matter? Yeah. Okay, and so the disturbance is at least 1 day. The disturbance is at least 1 day, but less than 1 month, with an eventual full return to pre-morbid level of functioning, and it cannot be better explained by major depressive or bipolar disorder than with psychotic features or another psychotic disorder such as schizophrenia, for example, a drug of abuse, a medication, or any other medical condition. Okay, and what does with marked stressors indicate? So, another way of saying brief reactive psychosis, if symptoms occur in response to events that singly or together would be markedly stressful to almost anyone in similar circumstances in the individual's culture. Okay, so this particular diagnosis it indicates added today to account for his presentation, correct, in the last month? Yes. So in part B, it says at least 1 day, but less than 1 month. At any point, do you actually put a beginning and an end on this particular reference in terms of dates or just amount of days? I kind of took it from beginning of April to beginning of May. Okay, and is this a diagnosis that takes time to arrive at by observing him over a period of time? I think so. And then seeing if it's going to persist would then turn into a different diagnosis. Okay, if it's beyond that month mark. Okay, thank you. So then let's turn to May 3rd of 2023. Could you please indicate what you learned in your meeting with Mr. Allen, and was this also in the APOD counselor cubicle? Yes, yeah, it was in the APOD counselor's cubicle. I started with him wanting to call his wife, and we attempted to assist him with those phone calls, but it didn't work. She didn't answer. So then he went on to provide a narrative of what took place in regards to the crime. Just out of the blue, what did he tell you? So he said he wanted to confess to his crimes and went on to tell his story. He reported seeing his parents the morning of the crime. He stated he was supposed to go eat with them, but opted to get himself a six-pack. He reported drinking 3 beers and then finishing the rest later. He stated, I bundled up. Once on the trail, he stated, I laid in wait. I laid in wait. They just needed him to say that. No real criminal says I laid in wait. That is a criminal term. That is a legal term, lying in wait. Criminals don't just say I'm lying in wait. They might say I'm hiding or waiting, but they're not going to say I was laying in wait. He reported seeing the girls and following them to the bridge. He mentioned doing something with his gun and stated, I think that it was when the bullet fell out. And then he said, I ordered them down the hill. He stated his intention was to SA the girls and mentioned that he thought that they were older than their biological ages. He said that he saw a van which scared him and caused him not to follow through on SAing the girls. He said he crossed a creek and then he cut their necks. He indicated wanting to make sure that they were dead. He reported covering their bodies with tree branches. He said he exited the area by keeping off the trail as to not be seen. He said he returned to his vehicle, which he parked by a nearby building. He stated he managed to continue living his life after time passed by and he hadn't been caught. Now, did you ask him about the crime that he had been charged with? I did not. Did you make reference to his prior confession in order to elicit the statement? No, I did not. Was there any indication prior to him making this statement that he was going to tell you about his crime? No. Did you prompt him at any point during his relaying this information to you? No. How did Mr. Allen appear to you with regard to his demeanor or emotionally after he told you this story? And that's exactly it. It's a story made up, fiction. He, I want to say, almost appeared relieved. He did have some concerns about his property and fearing he would not have food and water. I assured him that they could not withhold things from him. He mentioned he couldn't sleep due to safety concerns. He discussed a transfer to another facility. He reported previously consuming feces because he feared telling the truth. He reported not knowing why he blocked the camera or window with his mattress yesterday. He stated that he would not kill himself because he was too much of a coward. At the same time, he stated that if he died, he wanted his wife to know he loved her. That is all over the place. I don't think that's from somebody in their right mind. Now, during this conversation with him, did you have any concerns about his safety during this conversation? Well, I guess I should be specific. He said he was afraid to sleep. No. Was there any concern or reason that you could see he should not feel safe to sleep? No. Okay, and he talks about asking for property back. What was it at this point that he didn't have, if you know? I don't know in this. I'd have to really dig it up. This was a month after, so he would be having. And so, what did you note under additional clinical observations with regard to his ability to communicate? For the most part, it was adequate. There were some odd things here and there. He kept repeating that he didn't want to miss Easter. The paranoia that he mentioned about, not feeling safe, that's relatively normal in his situation. Was the information he provided regarding the crime that he said he committed, was that organized? It was. Did he have any psychotic symptoms? No. One of the assessment categories that you refer to is impulse control. Does that have any impact negatively on the statement that he gave you? No. And do you indicate whether he was responding to his treatment plan or being cooperative with the treatment plan in order to keep him stable? Whether he was cooperating with it? Yes. At this point in time, I think he was. And is that indicated in your assessment section? Yeah, I mentioned he was more organized than he'd been since his placement on self-unaliving watch. Okay, was he compliant with medication? That I don't know. If I direct you to your assessment paragraph at the bottom of the third page of the report, would that assist? Yes, changes. So he probably had a medication change, but I'm not necessarily noting non-compliance, just a medication change. Okay. And then in the section where you talk about the plan about what things you'll allow him to have. Yeah, or not have. So it looks like he had a lot of regular stuff. So again, when we were doing this, my intention wasn't to keep him in like a self-unaliving situation. He had to live in that cell. That's what central office wanted, right? So he could be on self-unaliving watch, but we could still allow him property. So mattress, blanket, clothing items, regular meal, regular property, except sheets and clothing. So were these clothing items you were keeping away from him because they related to a risk of self-harm? Yeah. Okay. Does that include sheets like traditional sheets? Traditional sheets, so he would have like a special blanket. Okay, I believe the next document would be something from May 5th. Is that correct? The evaluation of self-unaliving risk? Yes. So can you explain the May 5th document entitled Evaluation of Self-Unaliving Risk? Okay. I'm trying to see. We do these periodically while they're on self-unaliving watch, usually when we change them from close to constant or vice versa, or releasing them from self-unaliving watch. And this just kind of goes over his risk factors. They include categories of historical risk factors. Those are the ones that don't change. Clinical risk factors and situational risk factors, as well as protective factors. And as a result of this particular assessment, was there an adjustment made? I'm not sure there was an adjustment. Okay, and then the next document is an individualized action plan. Can you describe what that is? That's essentially his treatment plan. Is that also done periodically? Every 6 months, we need to review it. So, this would have been the review period, and the things included there, targeting the fact that he's high risk for self unaliving, working on the depression and anxiety, gaining insight into symptoms, and implementing healthy coping strategies. And so, what was the number one goal? Safety, ensuring safety. Okay. And then his mental health was the next goal? Yeah, targeting the depression and anxiety so they don't interfere with his daily functioning. At the end of that report, do you indicate whether there are changes in his level of watch? Changed from constant to close. So that would and that was back to the 15-minute checks. Okay, so would that indicate improvement? Yes. And that particular section actually provides a little historical data about his level of watch, does it not? Yes. And so it dates back all the way to November 4th of 2022? Yes. Okay. What is the next document in your exhibit? Looks like 5-9. Okay. And let's turn to the patient complaint section. Does Mr. Allen speak to you about his case again? Yes. And what does he say to you? He said, I just want to sign my confession. And what did you indicate to him? That he had to discuss that with his attorneys. Okay. During that session, does he also talk about other things that would indicate that the state of his mental health is improving with regard to what he might be looking to do with his time in order to keep himself occupied? He mentions some thoughts of self harm with the plan of diving off his sink and snapping his neck. He talked about wanting to plan his last meal, but he did say that he wanted to help others and get a job. So all of these things are inconsistencies, right? So doesn't that isn't that a red flag for her? But no, she doesn't think that that's psychotic or disorganized or whatever. She's just like, nah, he's normal. He's not psychotic. He's fine. But he's not logically thinking like someone whose thoughts are not impaired in some way. Was he asking for a job, like within the DOC? I believe so. But then he would go back to saying that he'd be better off dead. Okay, if you would go to the assessment section of the next page, was there any indication that he was exhibiting psychotic symptoms? No. And how was he doing cognitively? Mind impaired judgment and some preoccupations. Okay, what does that mean? Can you explain that? So maybe in this situation, it would have pertained to the talking about taking his own life over and over. And in the assessment conclusion, do you have any indication as to whether he's compliant with medication and responding to treatment? I never tracked medication. Oh, okay. Because sometimes it's hard to know. Do you sometimes ask him? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, but ultimately, it's a different record than I don't normally access. So in your assessment section, if it says patient is compliant with medication, is that him self-reporting? It probably would be, and I may have checked in this situation. So what is it then? Is it accurate or not? Okay, the next report is from May 10th. Do you see this one of 2023? Yes. Let's go to the patient complaint section. Are you meeting with Mr. Allen out of his cell on this day? Yes. And how did this day or visit begin? Okay, so there were issues with Mr. Allen being unable to use the phone because his tablet was broken, and I guess the phone wasn't available to him on the range. So I was able to get a phone approved by the warden so that we could try to make the phone call in there with him. Is this the first time you had ever gotten a phone for him to use it during a session in order to call? I think there was another time we tried and it didn't work. But this one time where he wants to confess to his wife, it just happens to work, right? They happen to get a phone. Interesting. So here we are trying again, and he was able to connect with his wife. And so at that point, do you leave the room? let's see. So I did leave the room, but then I came back when he was done with the phone call. He wanted her he wanted to call her back again to tell her he did it, and then he said I want you to hear this so you can understand. And so did he make another call? Yes, he did make another call and I believe she answered. I was able to hear them speaking. He asked whether his wife and family loved him and would continue to love him. He said he may have to spend the rest of his life in prison, thought that only he may only get a chance to see her once more, and mentioned the electric chair. He asked if she understood. Then he stated, "I killed Abby Williams and Libby German." And it appears his wife told him to stop saying that, and soon after the phone shut off. And then he told me she doesn't believe me. He said, "I didn't do everything I said I did, but I did kill Abby and Libby." And so, were you having a conversation with him to which he responded, "I didn't do everything I did, or I didn't do everything I said, but I did kill Abby and Libby"? No, he just said that. Okay, so we don't know what he's referring to, right, when he said that. "I didn't do everything I said." Yeah, I don't. Okay. What did you observe about his demeanor during this conversation with his wife or immediately following? Yeah, I mean, in terms of like his interactions with his wife, where he sounded really pleasant and affectionate, it sounded like a pleasant first phone call. And for the most part, even after that, he seemed okay. Okay. He remained calm, again, very affectionate towards his wife. He didn't cry. He was organized, clear, coherent, no evidence of psychosis. Now, the next report in the exhibit would be May 11th. If you could turn to that of 2023 and go to the patient complaint section, and I would direct you to the second paragraph. Did he make any statements about how he was feeling about the crimes that he indicated to you previously that he had committed? He mentioned wanting closure by apologizing to the victims' families. He then went on to say that he just wanted to see his wife. He also said he still needs to forgive himself. He said that he didn't know what closure would look like for him. It seems like these questions are being prompted. How can they just be it's odd that he would just say these things, blurt them out loud to his psychologist or psychiatrist, whatever. Now, in this particular day, do you make reference to his orientation to person, place, and situation? Oh, yes. Is that he was talk? Go ahead. We keep interrupting each other. He was talking about the days running together and not knowing the date, despite being provided with a calendar. He was oriented to person, place, and situation, but claimed not to know the date. Is that one of the tools that you use in your profession? Yeah. To determine whether someone is able to communicate clearly and be right, grounded in time and place? Yes. Okay. Oriented to person, place, time, and situation. Okay. Now, let me direct your attention to your report from August 3rd of 2023. In the patient complaint area, what is the conversation about on this particular day? So when I asked how he was doing, he said, "I want to go to heaven." Asked that, did he expand? No. Did he expand on why that was important to him? Oh no, he didn't say anything further. Wait, no, that's pretty much where it ended. "I want to go to heaven." And then I asked whether he had contacted his wife. He said, "I can't," but said he wanted to talk to her and see the family. Okay. Did he maybe if you read that whole paragraph, and we'll come back to that. Okay. With reference to contacting his family and his heaven reference. Okay. Okay. So he talked about being afraid of dying. He said he felt like he was dying. "I don't feel well," he said. "Feels my heart is going to quit. I had a heart attack before." He indicated fearing something would happen to him before he got a chance to say goodbye to his family. When asked about wanting to die, he said, "Part of me thinks I do." He denied any plan or intent to harm or kill himself. He indicated being confused and not knowing what was rational anymore. So, how is that not psychotic then? He's confused and doesn't know what's rational anymore.
But nah, he doesn't show any signs of psychosis.
When asked what he was confused about, he stated, "Because I don't know if I'm going to heaven." Did he indicate why he couldn't contact his family? I don't know if this was one where he was choosing not to or whether he still just didn't have a tablet. At any time, did he indicate to you that he felt that his family didn't want him to contact them? Yes. Was that after he was confessing? From the beginning, he would say things like, "I just need to let my wife go," basically, and then he's a burden and stuff like that. Okay, so that continued throughout? Mm-hmm. In different ways. Judge, I believe that's the conclusion of the exhibit published to the jury. The court says, okay. Ms. Walla, then in looking at exhibit, let me get my number here, 304. Okay. I'll just make reference to dates and give you a chance to look at that particular report. The court says, would counsel, and we may not touch all of them. The court says, before you go on, would counsel approach? Ms. Diener says, yes. There's a quick sidebar. Mr. Rosie says, can we have a restroom break, please? It's 11. The court says, oh, are you okay stopping? Mr. Rosie says, I'm getting the sense that our table could use a break. The court says, okay. Ms. Diener says, that's okay. The court says, okay. Mr. Rosie says, can we? The court says, yeah, that's fine. So the sidebar conference concluded. The court says, all right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break, give you an opportunity to get up and move around a little. While you're outside the courtroom, please keep your minds open. Please don't form any opinions or conclusions about anything. You may discuss the evidence that you've heard so far, but please only do that if all 15 of you are present and in the jury room at the same time. Don't deliberate. Gentlemen. So now they go off record for 15 minutes. Um, I want to point out, and she says this every time they go on a break, but it's so bizarre to me, and I've never heard this in any other courtroom, but they're allowed to discuss the testimony. They're allowed to discuss the case. Jurors usually are not allowed to discuss the case, like, period, at all, end of discussion. Like, not even to one another. Here they can. She allows them to. She says, don't deliberate, but you can talk about what you just witnessed in the courtroom. This is unheard of. I've never heard of that, but I just wanted to point that out. All right, so we do have some more cross-examination. I'm going to see how much we have because we're already an hour and 37 minutes into this, so hold on. All right, we do have a little while more to go. I'm going to keep going because I kind of want to get all of her cross in one video. So I just think it's nicer and cleaner to keep it all together so and to not break. So let's keep going. The court says, all right, back on the record. Ms. Diener, are you ready to continue? Ms. Diener says yes. Court says, gentlemen, do you need a water or anything? Ms. Walla says, or I'm sorry, Mr. Luttrell says, Ms. Walla, we have more water over here. Do you want one? She says, I'm okay, thank you. The bailiff says, all rise. The jury comes in. The bailiff says, thank you. You may be seated. The court says, thank you, gentlemen. All right, Ms. Diener, you may proceed. Ms. Diener says, thank you, Judge. Dr. Walla, do you recall Mr. Allen's physical appearance when you first met with him back in November of 2022? I do. And would you be able to provide, say, maybe a physical description with regard to his weight by comparison to today? Right. I think, when he got to us, he was maybe 180 pounds. Okay. And did weight kind of become a topic of conversation with regard to meals and refusing meals? Yeah, it did. And the exercising. Okay. It seemed like it was all positive at first. And refusing meals is a concern for DOC with regard to inmates. Is that correct? Hunger strikes. So it's a thing. Prisoners do hunger strikes to make a point. Okay. And so, as a mental health provider for him, would you check in with him about things like that if he was refusing meals? Yes, I would. And you indicated at the beginning it seemed positive. Can you expand on that? Just that he was taking care of himself by exercising and trying to lose weight. And sometimes he would refuse meals, but he only did it enough to the point he would reach the fourth meal that they have
to report it. He wouldn't reach that fourth meal that they would have to report. So you can miss up to 3 meals and it's fine. So if you miss 3, it's fine. But if you miss 4, they have to report it downstate. So he was very careful not getting into that fourth meal. Okay. And was there a time where he actually expressed some satisfaction with weight loss? I think so. And you indicated knowledge that he was exercising in his cell. Did he share that with you? Yes. Now, I'd a knowledge. What does that mean? Of exercising. Oh, he told you that he was exercising. That was a weird way of asking it. Now, I'd like to direct you to the exhibit 304 that's in the back of your binder behind the first or second tab. Okay. Those are in chronological order. I'm not going to touch on all of them. I just want them available to you for questions on direct or redirect. So I would like for you to flip to the report for November 10th of 2022 and take a look at the patient complaint area, the first 4 or 5 sentences. hmm Let me look and make sure that I'm talking about the right spot. Mr. Rosie says, I'm sorry, where are we at? Ms. Diener says, the date of November 10th, 2022. Oh, 2022, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's at the very beginning. Thank you. Okay. And actually, it'd be in the middle of the paragraph with regard to reference about what your purpose was with regard to mental health visits. In the middle of the first paragraph of the patient complaint paragraph, yes. So it talks about there were times where he would refuse to come out to see me and said that he felt he was a burden and that he was told by other staff that he had the option to refuse. So staff was telling him you can refuse seeing your therapist. And so I encouraged him to continue to come out for his visits. He mentioned being confused about who he should be communicating with, as not he had not been assigned a public defender at this point. What? I told him not to speak about his case with anyone except his attorney. I made it clear it was appropriate to accept help coping with mental health symptoms he is experiencing as a result of his circumstances. Okay, so does that basically encapsulate how you were intending to assist him without interfering with his case? Right. And this is very early on, correct? Yes. Within a week. Within a week of you starting services with him? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So now I'd like to turn to April 7th of 2023. Did you find that one? Yes. Okay. And go to the patient complaint area. Now, this would be after the first confession statement that you provided in your notes previously today, correct? Correct. Did you have a chance to read that paragraph? I skimmed it. Okay, sorry, I'll let you go ahead and look at that. Okay. In that particular session, did he make a reference to the fact that he was aware he had confessed? I told him he had confessed. Okay, did you also talk with him about why that might not be a good idea? Yes. I said it was not in his best interest and likely against the advice of his attorneys to continue to verbalize his claims of guilt, as this information could be passed on by other incarcerated individuals to the families and the media. Okay, so it appears, advising him for his own safety. He should not be talking about that? Right. In your clinical observations for that particular day, what do you note? It felt like he was being more blatant with feigning symptoms of confusion and memory loss and purposely behaving in a bizarre manner. So anything he does is either on purpose or just, normal. It has nothing to do with psychosis or hallucinogenics you've got him on. For people who might not be familiar with the term feigning, would that be similar with he's faking symptoms? Yeah, maybe a nicer way of putting it. Okay, yeah. And what particular symptoms were you referencing in this observation? So he said, but I didn't sign anything, right? I told him he didn't plead guilty in any formal manner. He was oriented for, uh, he was oriented times for person, place, and time and situation. He asked why he was still on self-unaliving watch. I let him know his ongoing behavior suggests he was not being safe, but it seems to kind of be the memory, claims of memory loss. Okay. Could you turn to April 10th? Again, the patient complaint paragraph on that particular date. Did you meet with him outside of his cell? I did. And did you make any observations with regard to him feigning symptoms? Some odd behaviors. So he was sitting with his back against the wall, raising his lower arms. He didn't respond when his name was called, just stared forward. He was naked. The condition of his cell was concerning as he had paper strewn about the floor. Officer logs indicated he may have been urinated outside of the toilet, talking to himself, and doing unknown things to his penis. He has been refusing meals and showers, admitting to various acts, talking about his wife, exhibiting religious preoccupation, and I believe they took him out of his cell to clean the cell. What papers would be strewn all over the cell? I'm assuming the ones that he got, the discovery. So his own discovery from his trial for his case. And so, what do you know about him receiving discovery? And are we talking about discovery in this case? Is that what you mean? All I know is that they had discovery at the facility and they were concerned about other incarcerated individuals learning what was in the discovery. So when they did give it to him, they removed those from being companions so they can't see the papers. That's the extent of it. I personally never saw them. So that's when they stopped using the inmates as the companions and switched only to guards. Okay, do you know approximately when he received those discovery papers? I want to say it was right before all of that stuff went down. And when you say this stuff went down, let's be more specific. Yeah. So we started with a report on April 5th of him confessing, which made reference to a previous day of confessions of others. Correct? Right. Does that help any relationship to what you're referring to? Yes. Okay. Can you explain for the jury, please? So it appeared that he received the discovery around the time that he started confessing, so early April. Okay. And why was that significant, you said, with regard to companions? That the warden didn't want the companions to be able to view the documents in his cell, so he changed them to be the officers. Because previously they would have been what? The other incarcerated individuals. Okay, so was that a step being taken to provide added protection for Mr. Allen and for the discovery? And for the discovery? Yes. Okay. Did you observe Mr. Allen to have a shift in his behavior, his presentation after he got the discovery? Yes. Let's go to April 12th and review the patient complaint paragraph. Were you able to see Mr. Allen outside of his cell that day? Yes. And what did you observe about his behaviors on that particular day? He was clapping, banging on something, kicking the door, masturbating. He continued to do so even after he saw that I was at the door. When I checked the camera, he was observed constantly being naked and moving around, touching his genitals, rolling around, making other purposeless movements. At that time, due to his refusal to wear a safety kimono, he will not be allowed recreation time outside of his cell as he cannot engage in rec in view of others without clothes on. And additionally, during a previous instance, he refused to leave the rec enclosure, resulting in custody staff spending an hour coaxing him to comply and return to his cell. Does any of that sound normal? You're going to say, no psychosis here. I beg to differ. I think there is some psychosis here that she's just blatantly ignoring. So, what did you note in the additional clinical observations for that particular day? That at that time I believed the behavior was instrumental. And what does that mean for a layperson? For secondary gain. So doing it in order to get something. So she's saying he's faking. Do you have any idea what it is that he was trying to get? Not necessarily. So this is just some speculation on her part with no actual motive as to why he would want to do this. She just flat out says, oh, he's faking.
You have no idea if he's faking or not. Yet here she is saying he's just faking. And let's move on to April 13th of 2023. The patient complaint is more lengthy on this particular day. Is there a particular notation that would explain what was going on that day? So what's going on that particular day? So I was informed that his behavior was escalating. He was laying in and consuming his own feces. We held a meeting with the warden, deputy warden, major health services administrator, centurion director of behavioral health, IDOC executive director of behavioral health, and a centurion psychiatrist. So we were looking into the involuntary medication. So we had our psychiatrist go and try to talk to him to offer him the medication, but his efforts were unsuccessful. However, the psychiatrist determined that he did not qualify for an emergent involuntary injection. Did you make a change to his watch level? That day changed from close to constant, yes. And under additional clinical observations, what did you note? I said it was possible he was experiencing an emotional breakdown, possibly due to being faced with the discovery materials and experiencing feelings of guilt and loss. He may be exaggerating or feigning for secondary gain. He may consciously or unconsciously allow himself to deteriorate to this state. It appears he has had little to no sleep since his placement on self-unaliving watch on April 4th, 2023. Initially, he'd get a few hours of sporadic sleep per day. In the last few days to 1 week, there were a couple days when no sleep was noted by the companion. This can definitely be a factor in his presentation. Whenever the etiology, his his current presentation is not indicative of stability. So he's not in a stable condition, whatever the reason for it, and yet she's still not saying he's psychotic. So at this point, you still had a concern that he was faking or exaggerating. Is that correct, based on your observations of him since November of possibly 2022? But it's getting to the point where it almost doesn't matter whether it's faking or not faking because he's deteriorating, so something has to be done about it. Okay, so there is a process then almost immediately following this where you participate along with other health professionals, and there's a decision for involuntary injection, correct? Correct. Okay, I'd like to direct your attention to April 17th of 2023. If you would, we'll go through this paragraph by paragraph, okay? Okay. Because it's a lengthy one, but in the first paragraph, if you could read the first paragraph of the complaint section and then I'll ask you a question. So I saw him at a cell front for his daily visit. Okay. He had a greasy, dirty window. He was standing in the middle of his cell with his eyes closed and one palm raised as if holding something. He was clothed in his safety kimono as opposed to being naked, suggesting improvement. He appeared to be speaking or mouthing words as though praying. This writer called his name a couple times with no response, and this writer stepped away to review the officer companion logs. Shortly after, Mr. Allen was at the cell front coherently calling this writer's name and asking to talk. He agreed to come out of his cell. So, was there something about your observations of his behavior and then his subsequent request to come out and talk to you by name that you found to be notable? I mean, that you look in there and he's acting brazenly, or bizarre, sorry, he's acting bizarrely, and then he just kind of stops when I walk away and was calling me. And so was it because I was watching him? That might be a thought in his mind, like to be faking it, I guess, because she was watching. Are you familiar with persons in an inmate situation that you've interacted with that suffer from psychosis? Yes. And is it within your professional capacity to make that kind of diagnosis, or is that for a psychiatrist? No, I can make that diagnosis. Okay, and so would a person suffering from psychosis go from the kind of behavior you first observed at the window and to then calling you by name and asking you to come for a visit? It's not completely impossible. Is it typical? Maybe not typical. Would it cause you to? Could happen.
Conclude that the person is psychotic, or would you need more information? More information. Okay, in the second paragraph, what does Mr. Allen share with you? So, when he comes out to his cubicle to talk, he kept his eyes closed for the majority of the session. He appeared open and willing to engage with me and made an earnest effort to convey his thoughts. He reported experiencing what he described as repeated nightmares or dreams, possibly describing his experience for the past 2 weeks in is my hypothesis. He stated that in them more people died due to his selfishness and that he had just wanted to tell the truth. He said, "I'm afraid I lied so much. I'm afraid the longer I make this go on." And he didn't complete the thought. He indicated becoming separated from reality at some point and has a desire to go back and make things right. Does that exchange seem to indicate that he's sharing coherent thoughts about his fears and concerns? I'd say yes. And the third paragraph? Okay, so he said, "I wish I had a medical." Objection, form of the question. I'm sorry? Form of the question. Uh, would you review the third paragraph, please? Sure. He said, "I wish I had a medical." I mean, review it to yourself and then I'll ask you a question. Oh, then you're going to ask me. Okay. And so, what are you documenting that Mr. Allen shared with you in that particular area of the report? That he wished he had a medical illness that would explain. He said he did some vulgar and disgusting things. That's not who I am. He went on to say, if I fake my own death and the entire world has ended, some of these things he's saying are kind of disjointed. So there's nothing more after that. The last thing I remember is I fell asleep and I kept activating nuclear war after my death and destroyed Earth. So it's sharing with you a dream, I suppose. Okay. Throughout his encounter, he exhibited disjointed thoughts, starting statements that appeared rational but either trailing off without completing them or providing irrational conclusions. When asked if he remembered what he had been doing in the past week, he stated singing, marching, crying, blaming everyone else. Okay, so he's sharing some unconnected ideas, correct? Yes. But then, in response to your question about what he'd been doing for the past few weeks, and he provides a list of behaviors, were those in some part correct? Yeah, I think so. And then, could you share how does she know that those are correct? Could we have some confirmation of that? And then, could you share with us your additional clinical observations from that day? It looks like after he received his involuntary medication on the 14th of April, there was some improvement noted. He appeared to be significantly deprived of sleep prior to this. He does not appear to exhibit auditory or visual hallucinations, but had exhibited grossly disorganized speech, paranoia, and delusional thinking. And then I just mentioned diagnosis. So, with regard to the diagnosis, before the actual language of brief psychotic disorder with marked stressors, you have RO. What does that mean? Rule out? Rule out. And what does that mean with regard to the process that you referred to when you were actually testifying about the diagnosis that didn't get documented until May 3rd? So we're still watching to see, it'll take a month, right? So for to have this diagnosis, it's a month-long process. Okay, and we're kind of in the middle of that right now. And then I would direct your attention to April 21st, the third paragraph. Okay. And in that particular area, are you documenting bizarre behavior by Mr. Allen? Yes. Did you find that particular behavior to be genuine, as in beyond his control? I didn't. And then on April 25th of 2023, the patient complaint section, if I could direct you to the fourth paragraph through just the fourth paragraph, what did you document in that area on your report? I was trying to elicit information on his insight into his condition as well as the etiology of his decline. He reported struggling longer than he acknowledged. but denied experiencing anything like this in the past. He reported feeling it could be due to not taking his medication, referring to his Prozac. So that's another thing. When you go to prison, if you have a medication for your mental health, like a Prozac or whatever, you're not going to get it in prison. They only have certain things that they can give you. So your medication is going to get changed. So that's one thing. They're going to, you're, that's already going to be messing with your mental health. And then to be, say he's on Prozac for 20 years and now all of a sudden he's got to change something. He's got to change that medication to something else. It's going to mess up your mind. It's going to mess with you. Even when you are starting on some kind of like antidepressant or whatever, you may have to, it's trial and error. Sometimes what works for one person might not work for somebody else. And you might start one medication and it might make you start acting a little more insane. So you may have to get off of that one and try something else. It's very touch and go. So to be taking him off of his Prozac or whatever he's on and then putting him on something else and also this Halidol on top of it, it's probably not a good situation going on for Richard Allen at the moment. Anyways, let's continue on what she said. He reported feeling it could be due to not taking his medication, referring to Prozac, although mentioning Seroquel a number of times as well. He stated he thought he was taking his medication. He stated, I think I wanted to have an in person visitation and I think I wanted a transfer. So, in your prior references, where you indicated that you thought that he was potentially feigning for secondary gain, is this at least a potential explanation for his behavior that he's providing to you himself? It could be. Well, what other secondary gain could he accomplish that? Those are definitely the big that you could think of. Those are definitely the big ones. Visiting, having the visits with his wife, and the transfer out. Okay. And you actually advocated for him to have in-person visits, did you not? I did. And those visits were with him, with whom? With his wife. And were you successful in doing so? I was. Is that something that happens typically for people in WCU? No. So were special accommodations made in order to allow Mr. Allen to see his wife? Yes, they were. And did you do it on multiple occasions? I don't recall how it went. I know I had kept talking to the warden about it, and eventually, I think one visit happened, and then I don't know. They figured out the second one later on their own. Okay. Do you believe those would have happened without your intervention? Probably not. Okay, and finally, April 28th of 2022, the patient complaint section is one large paragraph. If you could read that and we can discuss it, okay? So, what did you observe about Mr. Allen that particular day? I went to his cell front. He was laying in his bed naked. He looked up at me and when I asked whether he wanted to come out for a session, he said he had to shower first. I told him we did not have time for him to shower first, and I guess it wasn't shower day on the pod. There was a smell coming from the cell, but I took that as a positive, like he was aware that he's probably not in the right condition to come out for a session. So, well, what does that indicate about his mental state? That he's concerned about the fact that he may not be clean. Right. And it would be inappropriate to come out? Just improved insight. Did you talk with him about your advocating for him to get a visit with his wife? I don't see that. Okay. Did you ask him why he wasn't taking care of his daily living, like showering? Yeah, he said because I'm selfish. Oh, so we talked about the visit and I told him how he identified it being important to him. In a sense, I wanted it to be motivating for him to take care of himself. But we kind of just went on about flushing the Bible down the toilet, not having food or water. Well, let's talk about that. He makes a complaint that he doesn't have food or water. Is that something that could be true? No, he could be refusing food. Okay. Water. It could be shut off if he's flooding the cell.
Well, how does that work? If he's flooding the cell, what happens with the water source? They'll shut it off. I mean, not for a very long period of time, but that first few, I don't know the timing or anything. So it's a consequence. Yeah. Okay. But he would not be deprived of food and water as a punishment? No. And what were your clinical observations? I didn't see him as psychotic. He kind of, it felt, this is not like a very good word, but gamey. That's not even like a terminology that you use in your line of discipline. It is possible that he was severely depressed due to resulting in the lack of motivation for self-care, but much of what is being observed and documented in logs appear to be behavioral, defiant behaviors with no clear motive. Thank you. I'd pass the witness, Judge. Mr. Rosie says, the court, Mr. Rosie says, you want to, may we approach? The court says, sure. They have a sidebar. Mr. Rosie says, I'm okay doing this. I don't know if you want to start. I think it's going to take a while. I just know it's the lunch hour and I didn't know. The court says, yeah, if you wanted to do it after, we'll go about a half hour. I'm sorry, we'll go about a half hour, break at 12:15. Okay, sidebar conference concluded. And 1 second here, Your Honor. And now we're going to begin. Next time, we'll get to cross examination. So that is where we're going to end for the day. I'm glad we got through all that. This was a long one. I'm sorry, but I wanted to give you that background in the beginning, which took a little bit of time. And then I wanted to get through all of cross so the next episode can be all of, I mean, sorry, I wanted to get through all of direct. So the next episode can be all of cross. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below so far about Dr. Wallace's testimony. Again, all that stuff, the background stuff that I told you, the jury doesn't know that yet. So the jury doesn't have any of this real information. All of anything that they're hearing right now is just basically that he wasn't showing any signs of psychosis, and we're supposed to find this doctor credible for some reason. Because she hasn't given us a reason really not to yet, and hopefully we find out on cross some more reasons why not to find her credible. But yeah, what do you guys think of Dr. Walla's direct testimony? And let me know what you think is going to come out of her cross. Maybe some interesting stuff. I don't know. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit the like button, share, comment, all the good stuff. It really helps and it gets more views for this. And this is an important one because Dr. Walla is like their star witness and she's the one that has all the confessions. You know, she heard them all. She was the one treating him. So she has all the info about him, supposedly. So, anyways, thanks guys for watching. I will see you next week. Take care. That's the end of this Trial Transcripts Exposed. Thanks for following along with me. Like if you want more, subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments below. See you next time.